Airway Electric Appliance in Toledo, Ohio, started out making upright vacuum cleaners in 1920. And they have the familiar stick type design with the swivel nozzle and the indicator dial, which you can turn to connect a hose. And this is an early Airway operating manual here from the upright. And I'm turning to a page that has a note that I think is a forerunner of things to come. This is interesting. So at the time when dusting tools were always extra, when you bought a Hoover or whatever else, this was Airway's take on it. Vacuum cleaners are sold without attachments. Attachments in general are extra. Airway has no attachments. The utensils, which are a part of the Airway sanitary system, form a component part of the whole. That means they thought that above the floor cleaning was just as important as cleaning your rugs and your floors. And this today is more a sentiment of a person that likes to use a canister vacuum or a built-in rather than an upright. So in the late 1930s, just before World War II, Airway stopped making their uprights and started making canisters, which they called the Sanitizer machines. And after World War II, during which production was interrupted, they kept on making sanitizers. This is a manual for a post-war model 55A. It's got that familiar fire hydrant design, or a Dalek, as my dad called it. It looked like a Dalek from Doctor Who, the little robots. The idea with their design was, rather than a tank vacuum that you pulled behind you, you would set your sanitizer in the middle of the room and you would vacuum all the way around it as the hose would swivel. Some of these photographs you can tell were taken with the pre-war machine, which is a darker purple color. And we will look at some examples of those in a minute. An even greater weight was attached to the filtering qualities of this machine, as evidenced by the fact that they called it Sanitizer, than the original sanitary system uprights. Airway was at that time a big company. And this is all the wartime products that they made, including something for the medical and quartermaster corps that looks suspiciously like an Airway upright motor. I wonder what they were doing with that. And after the 55, they made the 66, and at that time the shape became more like the models that came after it, the 77, the 88, then the Mark series and the Centurion, etc. They were like this, but they had wheels and they had a power nozzle. But so here are some 30s Airway uprights, some of their last uprights that they made, both with rotating brushes that got them sued and cost them a lot of money because they violated the Hoover beater bar patent. And here is a 55A. This would be post-war. This is the latest version of the 55A. It has a logo that looks like this. This will be a little bit older and a little bit rougher. Still has the hose swivel on the top and the cage to store the hose and the cord. This logo has been badly repainted by yours truly. I think I got the shade of red a little too bright, and I'm not aware of a good way to get a good consistent color, because I tried dipping the whole thing and then wiping it off the raised portions, and that didn't work right. So eventually I had to use a little red artist pen, kind of color it in. But pre-war, they were a beautiful shade of purple, like this one. And this is your common pre-war Sanitizer model 55 without the A. These are quite a bit harder to find because they didn't make nearly as many of them. Post-war was everybody was buying loads of everything, but pre-war these are a little more unusual. This I have fitted with a reproduction cloth silver cord, but originally this machine would have come with a black rubber Belden cord. And where the bag goes. One difference also between the pre-war and post-war machines is the presence or absence of the air evacuator, which they referred to the hundreds of holes in this plate in the bag chamber that sits about 1/8 of an inch away from the wall that forms the body of the machine. And that allows air to flow all around the disposable bag. And in the bottom are your secondary filters. This one came with a cloth bag, reusable. It appears to be a genuine Airway piece. I don't know if this was a sales demonstration tool. I think that's more likely because this company put such weight on the disposable bag, it seems less likely that they would say, well, we have a cloth bag if you want one. But pre-war, they didn't have the air evacuator cage, so the bag, all the air had to pass through the dirt down to the intake. So there's a version. Before that, we have this version, and you can see the ring on the machine that holds the hose is a different design. It's, well, here, let's... So that's just a little bit more primitive. The body is different. You can see there's a seam on the one on the left, or a bead actually is what it is, not on the right. We have 4 little bent steel feet instead of the cast ring with the little nubs. Same color, same hose swivel. Same setup inside. I'm not sure if this is an original Sanitizer 55 hose or if this would be from a later machine, but it came with it and it sure looks nice. That is the original cord. Very supple, soft Belden rubber cord. They sure know how to make a good cord in those days. This one is the earliest. And I don't know when it's from. It is actually missing the model and serial number plate, but it is the most primitive. It's a very early, you could almost call it a prototype version. Notably, there is no cage to hold the hose. Just have these 3 little grab handles forming a kind of a clover shape on top. There is no hose swivel. The hose goes straight in the top. The castings are all somewhat different if you look at them compared to that. I believe this would have originally been polished. I believe these would have too. When I got this machine, it was painted a beautiful, horrible shade of fire engine red. And you can see the traces of that paint on the inside. It was all that color, the whole thing. And I was not sure if this was originally purple, but looking a little bit closer down in there, if you're able to see, there were the remains of the original paint job, which was kind of a charcoal gray. And so I matched that as closely as I could with this charcoal gray color. I think it looks very nice. I did the bands in silver, though I assume those would have originally been polished or plated. But as they had been painted already, I did not bother trying to get the paint off and leave the plating. But you can see the switch design, even though the switch plate looks very similar, it is more primitive. It's held on with screws. And a black cord had been wired onto the machine, but inside I found the end of the original cord, and you can tell it's original because of how deteriorated it is. And that burgundy color looked to me to be a very close match to a Kirby Legend 2 cord, so that's the one I put on it. And so this earliest sanitizer machine is complete. And if anybody has any information on exactly when this and this would have been from, I'd love to hear it.